In 1996, when Steve Jobs started his second stint at Apple, the company was almost bankrupt. Within 2 years, it was profitable once again. And today, it is the world's most valuable publicly traded company. Some credit Steve Jobs as a visionary leader, but one researcher who used to work with Steve Jobs and studied him quite a bit calls him a smart leader instead of a wise leader, which is what he could have and should have been. For more on that, we are joined by Dr. Prasad Kaipa, Senior Research Fellow at the Center of Leadership, Innovation and Change at the Indian School of Business, and Dr. Roger Lehman, Affiliate Professor of Entrepreneurship and Family Enterprise here at INSEAD Knowledge. Gentlemen, welcome to INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you.
Dr. Prasad Kaipa, let's start with you. In your upcoming book titled From Smart to Wise, you argue that it is more important for leaders to be wise rather than smart. What is the difference, and why is it important for leaders to be wise?
Smartness allows people to become savvy for their own self-interest. In the globalized world that we live in, you can be smart to some people sometimes, but the smartness is a commodity that everybody is trying to buy in. So, if you, let us say, reach the end of or pinnacle of smartness, but tomorrow somebody is going to come in and knock you off that particular position. So, it is a race that has no end to it.
Dr. Lehman, how do you go from smart to wise then?
I think the essential piece is self-awareness, and through that self-awareness grows a depth of something that goes beyond just those smart, if you will, goals, as Dr. Kaipa was expressing. And without self-awareness, one often stays stuck in almost like a merry-go-round of using the same formula repeatedly. The other issue is that through self-awareness, one of the issues that often happens is smart leaders keep using the same formula even when the context or the situation or the market has changed, and what was smart becomes ineffective. And without self-awareness, it's very hard to move out of your smartness.
Dr. Kaipa, that is quite similar to what you describe as having blue filters on or being in the blue zone, and having red filters on and being in the red zone. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Our smartness essentially has got two dimensions. One, I call it being in the red zone. That means you are more aggressive, you are always trying to look for what is the next opportunity, and you are looking at a big picture, big vision, and you want to stay on that visionary perspective, but you do not pay sufficient attention to how does that vision get executed. Where are the problems, whether it is cost issues, quality issues, delivery issues, you feel that those are not your job in that respect. The second kind of smartness is about being cautious, careful, paying attention to operational excellence, paying attention to the supply chain, paying attention to the execution of a problem, making sure it gets done impeccably, it gets done on time, under budget, to the highest customer satisfaction. This is obviously a gift many organizations would love to have. And at the same time, if a person stays only in the operational domain, in the depth of getting the stuff done, but not being comfortable to take the risks, not being able to see the big picture, not being able to step outside their function and learn to see how their functional expertise can connect with the functions other side of their organization, then that blue zone perspective could only lead to growth within the small box, but it does not allow us to become competitive and successful in the ambiguous market that we are.
In that sense, you could say Steve Jobs was a typical red zone leader, while his successor, Tim Cook, at Apple, was more of a blue zone leader. How are they different from each other?
Steve Jobs, in his first run in Apple, he was very much a smart leader. but when he came back the second time, he was beginning to demonstrate in certain areas wisdom. He did act with wisdom to start the Apple stores. He did act with a wisdom when he began to respect Jony Ive and his designs, and he began to work closely with him. And he also began to demonstrate wisdom when he allowed Tim Cook to become the COO first and CEO. So, there are dimensions of wisdom Steve Jobs began to show, and maybe if he were to live long enough, if the book were to come out, his biography, when he was still alive, and see the reactions, I would assume that self-awareness would have moved him more and more into wise leadership. On the other hand, Tim Cook, when he was in the operations role, when he was primarily working from supply chain aspects of it, he did not talk about Foxconn, he did not talk about some of his suppliers joining some of the consortiums. He focused on what his job was and he stayed in his zone. But he joined as a CEO, he became the CEO. By January, he was in China, he was talking to public about increasing the quality of life for some of the employees, and he began to step up to the plate and recognize some of these things could not be dealt with from his own preferential zone. He had to step up and come to wise leader zone.
Dr. Lehman, that is similar to what you described as the identity-based leadership model, where Tim Cook pretty much takes on a new identity to become a wise leader.
I think the whole point of identity-based leadership is that it's at those fluctuation points where one has the opportunity, and now we link it back to self-awareness. As Dr. Kaipa was mentioning, when you move from one company to another, or you move from one region to another, or you move from one role to another, or you move from one team, same role, new team, to another. Internally, externally, any of those fluctuation points create an opportunity for the leader to step back and think about what is my role and how does my identity in this role, now how is that defined? By myself, by my employees, or my direct reports, or my boss, or my customers, my stakeholders. And what we're seeing is that particularly as you move into more senior roles in an organization, competency-based leadership is too much of a formula.
Yeah.
And that it's really the opportunity for the leader to step back and reflect on this, broadly speaking, the identity and the role, where they can ask themselves, how do I now need to adapt? How do I now need to change? How this happened with Tim Cook, I don't know. And there are a number of examples of leaders where you can ask yourself, I wonder what happened.
Dr. Kaipa, you described Steve Jobs as a master reframer. How is reframing important, and how does that make one a wise leader?
Many times leaders, when they are in senior levels, they have to focus on growth, and there are only two ways to grow. One is innovation, second is mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures. If you want to grow organically, strategic innovation is great, and once upon a time you could come up with a strategy and you had 2 years or 3 years to be able to develop the capabilities within the organization and become successful over a period of time. Now people are recognizing that kind of a product and that kind of a service innovation, which takes a long period of time, may be appropriate, but not always gives you the competitive edge. So in that respect, they came up with a business model innovation. So you change the business model and then suddenly things change, like Steve Jobs went ahead and came up with the framework where the carriers, the telecommunication carriers actually pay for some of the money back, the data that they use, they paid back. It is not just selling the phone, but creating a service contract with the people. That business model made him so successful. Now almost 60 to 65% of Apple revenues come out of telephones, the cell phones, which didn't exist 5 years ago. So when leaders reframe the story, when they tell the same facts in a different way so that it clicks in the followers, then they are creating a whole new opportunity. That kind of reframing is what is needed by the wise leaders. When you reframe, it allows organizations to grow in a sustainable and in a meaningful way.
Dr. Kaipa, Dr. Lehman, thank you for joining us on INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Appreciate it.